Satoru Sayama was born in Shimonoseki, Yamaguchi, Japan, on November 27, 1957. When he was young, he grew up watching wrestlers like Antonio Inoki and Mil Mascaras. In July 1974, Sayama entered the New Japan Pro Wrestling Dojo to pursue his dream of becoming a pro wrestler, against the wishes of his parents. Sayama made his pro wrestling debut on May 28, 1976, in Tokyo at Korakuen Hall. In New Japan in 1977, Sayama took part in a wrestler versus kickboxer match when he battled Marc Costello. This was still before Sayama had any real extensive kickboxing training, so he took what basically was somewhat of a crash course in kickboxing and ended up losing the bout. However, he had learned valuable lessons and was motivated to keep pursuing the striking aspects of combat sports, which was a precursor to Sayama's vision and dream to create a new combat sport. Before he was able to accomplish that, he had to go through several more years of pro wrestling first, and in those years, he used his physical gifts to the best of his ability and became a revolutionary in-ring performer. Sayama would always keep in the back of his mind that he wanted to pursue learning more about striking and incorporate it more into the pro wrestling game. Sayama was sent on an excursion to Mexico from June 1978 until September 1980. This is something New Japan would usually do with wrestlers who were relatively small in stature, since the Mexican Lucha Libre scene was a great way for relatively smaller wrestlers to excel due to its emphasis on faster-paced, more athletic and acrobatic style that catered to lower weight classes. However, Sayama couldn't be further removed from what he actually wanted to do, because Mexican wrestling was almost the opposite of what Sayama liked about combat sports. Sayama was more interested in the hard-hitting aspects, while Lucha Libre Mexicana focused on show and not much on stiffness and realism. Whenever he wasn't wrestling, Sayama used his spare time to train in kendo, karate, aikido, judo, and other martial arts. Around this time, Sayama also got the opportunity to spend some time with Karl Gotch in Florida. This helped Sayama to feel encouraged again to pursue his dream and believe in his dream to make a difference in the world of combat sports. After wrestling in Mexico, Sayama toured England for a bit, but Sayama was told to come back to Japan by New Japan as they wanted him to become Tiger Mask, which was a Japanese anime character. Sayama didn't like the idea of being a masked cartoon gimmick, but he did it because he realized he had to do it in order to become successful in the pro wrestling business. On April 23, 1981, Sayama became the famous masked wrestler known as Tiger Mask. Two of the many aspects of Sayama's game that made him so thrilling to watch in action were his tremendous speed and his ability to hit a surprise move from any angle. He was decades ahead of basically every wrestler from his generation in terms of innovation and his ability to raise the bar of what is possible in pro wrestling. It's not surprising that his 1981 through 1983 feud with Dynamite Kid is one of the most legendary feuds of all time, since Dynamite Kid was also one of the few wrestlers during that era who was able to have matches that were so ahead of their time that it seemed like they belonged decades into the future. The feud focused on fast-paced and athletic junior heavyweight action, and their series of matches inspired generations of pro wrestlers. Satoru Sayama versus Dynamite Kid was a feud that helped wrestling slowly shift away from the big, slow power guys and shift slowly towards favoring more athletically skilled talents. The April 21st, 1983 Dynamite Kid vs. Tiger Mask match is still one of the greatest pro wrestling matches ever, because everything they did felt like they did it while engaged in a competitive match, not just for the sake of being spectacular. Them being so competitive and intense, yet still being able to be light years ahead of their time, made this match so advanced that a lot of people in wrestling today still fail to understand what made a match like this so great, since a lot of wrestlers nowadays are obsessed with getting good ratings from reviewers, forgetting that they're supposed to put over their matches as a fight and not a posing exhibition. What's also impressive is that the Sayama vs. Dynamite matches never needed more than 20 minutes to show what great wrestling was able to look like. That's definitely unlike a large part of today's wrestling in the 2020s. Unlike most wrestlers nowadays, Sayama and Dynamite had the fans in the palms of their hands throughout their display of creativity and risk-taking. Meanwhile, nowadays it seems the wrestlers are too worried about having to wrestle a certain type of match to be fully accepted. Sayama's feud with Kuniaki Kobayashi in 1982 and 1983 was another top-notch feud in New Japan. During the second half of 1982, Sayama would appear several times on WWF TV. The WWF and its fans couldn't believe what they were seeing, since Sayama's style was light years ahead of the clunky style of the simplistic WWF workers. The only way the WWF commentators could describe what they were witnessing was by describing Sayama as a quicker version of Mil Mascaras. It's not uncommon for people to think that Sayama was only great and relevant from 1981 through 1983, because that's when he had his famous run as the first Tiger Mask in New Japan. However, his run in the original UWF in 1984 and 1985 oftentimes seems to be overlooked. This is why it's important to have a closer look at his work in UWF. He was initially known as the Tiger in UWF, but he would soon become known as Super Tiger, which was fitting since he was a super worker. Sayama must have been bitter from him not being a main eventer in New Japan, despite being the most amazing performer, while duller performers like Antonio Inoki and Tatsumi Fujinami got all the spotlight. Of course, there were also money issues that led to a bunch of workers leaving New Japan. That being said, Inoki deserves some credit for planting the seeds of the UWF mindset of having matches between people with a variety of martial arts backgrounds. Inoki had always been interested in the idea of pitting fighters of different disciplines against each other, but it was UWF that went further than just toying with the idea from time to time, and eventually became one of the most important leagues in pro wrestling history due to its influence on pro wrestling and even MMA. Sayama's awesome run as Tiger Mask from 1981 through 1983 showcased his physical gifts and his high-flying ability, but his run in UWF showcased his passion for shoot-style fighting. Initially, he would still rely a lot on flashiness and spectacle in UWF, but he eventually started letting go more and more of the aspects of the style that made him famous as Tiger Mask in New Japan. And he excelled in UWF shoot style to the point that he was better at it than anyone else at the time, 1984 and 1985. Along with his ability to hit great-looking kicks, Sayama's ability to use footwork and feints to set up things made him the best of the best at striking. Now with more of a focus on strikes, takedowns, and submissions, and with less of the regular pro wrestling silliness, Sayama was fighting in a style that was a lot closer to how he wanted combat sports to be. In particular, Sayama's feud with Yoshiaki Fujiwara and even Nobuhiko Takada, who were still in their prime back then, produced top-notch bouts in UWF. Sayama unmasked himself to emphasize that he felt his legacy in shoot wrestling was more important than the glory of Tiger Mask. The UWF was a unique and groundbreaking league, as it really put shoot wrestling on the map and was somewhat of a precursor to proto-mixed martial arts. The UWF shoot-style matches were worked, predetermined, but they were worked in a way that was a lot more realistic than standard pro wrestling. So it really was the bridge between pro wrestling and MMA. The UWF was a very promising league and had its fair share of quality bouts, but the ending of the league was very disappointing. Sayama and Akira Maeda used to get along well, but by 1985 they didn't see eye to eye anymore and had different ideas about the direction of the UWF. Sayama wanted more of a focus on striking, and was thinking of changing some rules, while Maeda felt that grappling should be the main focus. Sayama believed that the kickboxing and striking aspect of the matches was necessary to make the UWF style more exciting. The heat between the two culminated on September 2nd, 1985 in a one-on-one match when Maeda gave Sayama a shoot low blow. Sayama stayed around for a little while longer in UWF, but he was fed up with the backstage politics and decided to once again retire from pro wrestling. The original UWF never had another show after Sayama's final UWF match on September 11th, 1985, and folded soon after. In 1985, disgruntled by pro wrestling's backstage politics, Sayama released a book called Kayfabe, in which he exposed the pro wrestling world he had started disliking more and more. That same year, Sayama became the founder of one of the very first MMA leagues in the world, about a decade before the term MMA was coined, when he founded the Shooto League. Shooto wasn't just a league, as the combat sport Shooto, originally called shooting, was a fighting system created by Sayama. It was a precursor to modern MMA. Sayama wanted to capture the essence of combat sport by combining key elements of various combat sport traditions. You could say that in a way, Sayama was the godfather of MMA. The Shooto sport was created in 1985, and the Shooto League was founded in 1989. Sayama also owned his Super Tiger gym. During the second half of the 1980s, Sayama spent a lot of time training fighters, and Sayama's training method was quite ruthless. Some of the people Sayama helped train include Yuki Nakai, Noboru Asai, and Yori Nakamura. Sayama was so ahead of his time with his visions for the future of combat sports that the world wasn't quite ready for it. By the time the world started getting ready for it, Sayama started having disagreements with the board of directors of Shooto, leaving the company he founded to return to the pro wrestling scene in the summer of 1996. In between the years of his retirement from pro wrestling and his return to pro wrestling, he would occasionally appear in exhibition or demonstration fights. From the 1990s onwards, whenever he wasn't known as Satoru Sayama or Super Tiger, he would be known as the first Tiger Mask or Shodai Tiger Mask. After Sayama's successful run as Tiger Mask from 1981 through 1983, there were several wrestlers who had a Tiger Mask successor type gimmick. Mitsuharu Misawa was Tiger Mask II in All Japan Pro Wrestling from 1984 through 1990. Koji Kanemoto was Tiger Mask III in New Japan Pro Wrestling in 1992 through 1994. Tiger Mask IV, Yoshihiro Yamazaki, made his debut in 1995 and spent most of his first 6 years embodying the Tiger Mask gimmick in Michinoku Pro before joining New Japan Pro Wrestling in 2002. In RJPW, Super Tiger II and Tiger Shark emerged on the scene. Women's wrestler Kendi Okutsu was known as Tiger Dream in 1998 in Arceum. A women's wrestler trained by Sayama and Jaguar Yokota, known as Tiger Queen, made her debut in 2021. Apart from all the successor gimmicks, there have literally been a countless amount of wrestlers that were influenced by Sayama's in-ring work. And to even begin to list those who have been influenced either directly or indirectly would be a nearly impossible task. Satoru Sayama is an extremely important figure in the history of professional wrestling, and he should be considered one of the all-time greats. Sayama stands out as an all-time great not only because of him being so ahead of his time and so influential, but also because of his ability to do everything he did with a high level of explosiveness. This is my overall conclusion of Satoru Sayama's career. From 1977 through 1979, he was very good. In 1980, he was excellent. In 1981, he was great. From 1982 through 1985, he was an all-time great. He was not active from 1986 through 1993, as he was retired from pro wrestling. From 1994 through 2000, he was pretty good. From 2003 to 2014, he was average. As an in-ring performer, Satoru Sayama was at his best during the 1980s. Not much footage exists of his pre-1981 work, but during the little footage we have of his pre-1981 work, it is clear that he already showed the potential to eventually become the great worker he ended up becoming. Even though one could say that he was carried by Dynamite Kid and Kuniaki Kobayashi in their best matches in New Japan Pro Wrestling, Sayama was easy to carry, and Dynamite and Kobayashi never had any matches as great against anyone else. It is clear that Sayama was one of the greatest wrestlers on the planet during his revolutionary peak period as Tiger Mask from 1981 through 1983. He was also probably the most spectacular wrestler in the world, with Dynamite Kid being the only real competition. In UWF in 1984 and 1985, he was the one who was best at the UWF style, which was against all odds, since a heavyweight shoot style is obviously something quite different from the high-flying junior heavyweight style he excelled at in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Sayama was far ahead of his time at whatever he did. Sayama reinvented himself and evolved as a more complete and realistic shoot-style worker in UWF. This also shows he was able to be a great in different styles, and he was able to raise the bar of the styles he was a pioneer in. As great as he was from 1981 through 1984, it was perhaps in 1985 that he truly reached his peak as an all-round performer. Obviously, this is debatable, since his run as Tiger Mask from 1981 through 1983 was far more legendary and featured more spectacular in-ring work overall. However, if there is 1 year of his career that Sayama was easily the best professional wrestler in the world, it has to be the year 1985, as nobody else came close to being as great as he was that year. As Sayama was not active as a pro wrestler after retiring in 1985 until returning as an active pro wrestler in the summer of '96. He was pretty good during the 1990s, but it was nothing like his peak years of the 1980s. After the late 1990s, his work really declined drastically. This was understandable because he was older, heavier, and many years removed from his peak years. Sayama's work in the 2000s and beyond is very underwhelming. Of course, this was understandable and expected. He would throw some good kicks here and there, and for the rest it just felt like he was being a nostalgia act, relying on some of his old tricks that were now executed in a far less spectacular and far less convincing fashion. In the period of the 2000s and beyond, it seems like he only gave a couple of decent performances. With that being said, the post-peak era really isn't that important in reviewing the career of the legendary Sayama, as his greatness of the 1980s should forever receive high praise. In closing, Satoru Sayama should forever be remembered as one of the all-time greats. Without further ado, let's have a look at the list of Sayama's 20 best matches. Here is a list of Satoru Sayama's 20 best matches in chronological order.